Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to another cosplay tutorial. Today I'm showing you how to make this Gambit armor. This is version 2, as the title says. That is version 1, and you can get to that in the description if you want to watch that one. But yeah, so this is version 2. It is made differently than that one. That one is made by layering up the muscles and skinning over it. This one is made by cutting in the back and defining the muscles that way. So basically this is, here's two different versions, pick which one you want and make it that way. That's what I'm doing here. This one was actually going to be my backup in case that version didn't work. Luckily that one did. I like that one better than this. It's just preference. I like that style better. But some people do, I've seen this one work out really well. So just practice a lot and you might get better results than me. So this is my first time doing armor like this. My friend Atlas has done this type of thing, the same method as this, and gotten better results. So I know it's possible. And I've seen a bunch on YouTube. So just practice and you'll get it better than mine. Mine's just put together really fast. So like I said, pick a version, whichever one you want to do. If you want to see how to do this version, then continue watching the video and we'll get right on into the tutorial. When making this version, I actually traced out the shape of the first version that I made, but I made it a little bit wider on the sides to make up for the fact that version 1 has a vertical curve down the center, so I had to make up for it because this one is flat. To get a pattern that fits your body, you can wrap yourself in plastic wrap, like the kind you use to cover food, and then a layer of duct tape. It also helps to have a friend or family member do this for you, but you can do this alone in front of a mirror if you want. I also cut the piece out of 10mm EVA foam, and I picked this thickness for a specific reason, and then I cut it out with a utility knife. I marked the center of the piece using version 1 as a guide, since it has a center seam. I can just use that to mark the center on the top, and then the point at the center of the bottom obviously marks the center point there, and then I can use a long T ruler to mark the entire center line. And then to mark where the muscles are going to be defined, I just guessed placement with no real measuring. I've been an artist using pencil and paper my entire life, so I'm pretty good at judging these things without measuring, but it might be easier for you to make a pattern directly on the armor, and then cut that out and trace it onto the armor instead of just guessing. Once the muscles are drawn on, I use a very sharp new blade in my smaller X-Acto knives, and then I carefully cut out a V-shaped groove. This is kind of hard to explain, but you go from about a 1/4 inch away from the line on both sides, cutting with the blade tip pointing towards the line, and this will cut an angle, making a valley right where the line is. I do this to all of the lines except the top that separates the chest from the collar section, because there's other details that go there, and it doesn't need to be defined like the rest of this. Be sure you're extremely careful. I wasn't careful enough and accidentally cut through the foam. You do not want to do this. The entire point is to not cut all the way through, so I had to use contact cement to try to close the holes that I made. And you can actually see them pretty bad, and I can't start over, so I just have to live with them there. Luckily, this isn't the armor that I'm using, but just a second option for you guys to see how to make something, so just make sure you're more careful. I used contact cement in the V-cuts that I just made. The whole point of this was to glue those cuts shut, so on the other side, there will now be an angle in the shape of those cuts. Mine doesn't look exactly how I've seen them done before, but you can try this on some scrap foam and see what you get it to look like, and just practice a lot. And now, on the front, I glued together the areas where I cut all the way through on accident. You can only see one on video right now, but once I started pulling the other cuts into place, 2 more showed up that are much larger and easy to see in the final piece. Again, just be careful not to do this and you'll be fine. And here you can see what it looks like all glued together, with all 3 accidents. And now I'm making what will be the collar piping detail. I'm just using some 10mm EVA foam half dowels, and I cut it into angles to get the right design for the bottom one. And then for the neckline, I just glue a single one of these in place, only cutting it to the length that I need. These half dowels can be bought this way directly from the store. They are what you get when you take a regular dowel and cut it in half down the entire length. But these are factory cut, so they look nicer than if you do it yourself. To connect the angled edges together, I just used some contact cement, which I should actually mention, you should always wear a respirator with this stuff. The fumes are very harmful to your lungs, as well as you're going to want to use 2 coats since the foam absorbs most of the first coat. And as you can see, I'm using the same contact cement to glue the half dowel to the armor, and for placement I just held it down and carefully traced it out so I knew where to put the glue. I used some 10mm full-size dowels, as in they aren't cut in half, for the bottom trim. and I didn't have enough length using just one, so I glued 2 of them together. I didn't want a seam for this, but I have no choice. I then contact cemented this entire piece to the bottom edge of the armor and trimmed the ends to match the edge of the sides of the armor. Now that the armor itself is done, I need to make the straps to attach it. Honestly, do whatever you want. What I did was make some straps from 4mm foam. If you saw my previous version 1, it's the exact same thing, except on this one, the ends of the straps that connect to the sides of the armor, I made them of a larger surface area. I don't know why I did this, maybe just to be different or something, but you don't have to do that. I was hoping this would help pull the sides into shape a little better, all the way up the side, but it didn't do that at all. So again, do whatever you want for the straps. However, before gluing the straps onto the sides, I need to actually curve the entire armor. I do this again the exact same way as version 1, where I glue a strip of 4mm foam from left to right, but when I glue it down, I curve the sides so that it glues while it's curved already, so it can't uncurve and flatten back out. This will force it to stay in this shape forever. And I do this to the collar on the pieces that are going to go over my shoulders. This just makes everything fit easier, and since it won't flatten back out, it won't be tugging on the straps. And here you can see how I put on the straps. I just glued them to the back of the sides of the armor. I'm going to trim the strap's length shorter once I test fit it and see how much overlap I actually need. And you can see how I did the same curve thing where I curved the foam while it was being glued together. This worked for the vertical curve on the side, but it did nothing for the horizontal curve like I was hoping. Oh well. After test fitting, I realized I needed a strip to do that same kind of curved gluing, but vertically on the chest, so that it's closer to my body. This is actually the reason the first version was made with a curved center seam, because that does this exact thing. The only difference is that this one looks cleaner because it has no seam showing on the collar where that one was never skinned over. And now I mark where I want the line details on the collar to go. Honestly, I should have done this before putting the collar piping on. Luckily, I didn't put the neckline piping in yet, but if I would have just left the tracing marks on there and not glued that part down yet, I wouldn't have to worry about being careful to not cut into the piping. So yeah, maybe just do this part before gluing that on. For the design, I basically just looked over at my dress form that had my other armor on it and copied it. And that one, I looked at Google at another cosplay I liked and based it off of that, but not doing the exact same design they had. I want these to kind of be my own thing that isn't exactly like somebody else's. Also, the lines are about 1 inch thick, and I messed up in the other video and I said 1 3/4 inch thick, but those are also only 1 inch. Honestly, I think these are still a little too wide, but nothing I can do now. Do whatever you like. But also something good to know, these lines are just scored in. They only go a few millimeters into the foam, not all the way through. I then use my heat gun, which has 2 different settings, and I put it on the lower setting and run the heat over the cuts I just made. The heat will slightly shrink the foam, which opens the cuts I just made, making them even more visible. Also, you don't have to cut these in, you can just paint the lines on if you want. I'm just showing you what I wanted to do. If you want the lines to be just painted on, go right ahead. While I had the heat gun plugged in, I decided it might be a good idea to just use it to try to get some better curvature on this thing. So I put it on the higher setting and blasted the foam with it, and then folded the sides in and held it there until it was cooled enough that it would stay that way. I didn't need to do this on the first version because that was 4mm foam, which is less than half the thickness of this one, so it's nowhere near as stiff as 10mm, and this stuff just does not like to stay where you put it. To close up the waist straps around your back, I contact cemented some Velcro to the foam. I said this in the last one, but if you get this polyester backed Velcro stuff, contact cement in a few layers on it works perfectly. Also, I ended up having to buy more since I used the last of my previous stuff in version 1, so I just bought this in a 2-inch width, so I didn't need to use multiple strips like I did in the other one. The shoulder straps are also exactly the same way as version 1. Each one is a strip of 4mm foam contact cemented to the underside of the collar pieces that go over my shoulder, and then cut to length after test fitting and glued to wrap around the waist straps. If you want, you can do something else here, it doesn't matter as long as it works. And now that the entire thing is built, I sprayed it with multiple coats of Plastidip. However, the Plastidip is too thick to get into the cuts I made for the line details on the collar, so I have to use matte black acrylic brush-on paints to make the inside of the cuts black. Also, however, this changes the texture and finish of the Plastidip, because I can't go only into the cuts. A lot of this is going to get on the surface too. So I just go over the entire collar and the piping, including the piping on the bottom of the armor, with matte black. This is also good because having this extremely matte surface makes it far easier for the next layer of paint to go on. Silver is annoying and only works on matte finished when it's applied on top of another paint. But for now, I move on to the pink paint. This was a nightmare that I was not expecting. I used foam brushes because there is no way to cover this large of a surface with a normal brush, and these don't have nearly as bad of brush strokes as normal brushes do. Just know that I used those little 2-ounce bottles because out of 3 stores, including Walmart, Fred Meyer's, and Michael's Crafts, only Michael's had this shade of pink, which Walmart actually had no shades of pink at all, which is weird. And then when I did find this paint at Michael's, they only had 2 bottles. They had nothing else in the entire store even close to the right color except for these 2 bottles. And I used pretty much the entirety of both bottles for this one piece. There might be a few spurts left in the second bottle, but that's it. I also wanted to use acrylic paint specifically because they flex a lot better than spray paints and won't crack on me nearly as bad or as often. Though what I should have done was use white Plastidip. So yeah, do that instead and save yourself the headache. Or at the very least, use white on top of this black before you use the pink. In between doing layers of the pink paint, I use silver on the line details and all of the piping. If you saw my last video, you'll know how much I hate this bottled silver paint, but I have no way of getting more right now. Just know that if you want to use silver paint in the bottle, never buy more than 1 at a time if you don't plan on using the entirety of the bottle in a single day, and never let it sit unused for even over a day. No matter how much I shake the bottle, even for a full 15 minutes, which I mentioned in the last video, it does nothing. Usually this mixes the paint so it's not as thin and watery. You know, the same exact reason you shake a bottle of ketchup or mustard before using it, so it's not watery anymore. Yeah, that's what's supposed to happen when you shake up paint. With silver, this does nothing. If you have it longer than 1 day, throw the paint out and buy a new one, and just hope it's not as bad. Also, it's good to know you can use a hairdryer to help dry the paint, and I use the cool setting button or whatever it is so that it's not a bunch of hot air coming out. And then after I do any touch-ups that are needed, it's finished. I also did not use clear coat on this because I only have spray can stuff at the moment, which can crack, but you can use a brush-on acrylic clear coat if you want. Alright, so that is how I made this second version of Gambit's armor. So I don't really have anything else to say, and my arm is killing me now because I have been messing up these intros and outros just to get the right version of them. And it's been like 25 minutes of me just holding this thing and continuing to do this. So yeah, my arm hurts. I'm gonna put it down now and get out of here. So that'll be it for the entire tutorial. So if you like it, go ahead and hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.